for this second episode of the Fantastic Vengeance in film and shows adaptation. I've read 3 Fantastic Four books. That one was quite fun. We got the coming of Galactus in the 60s. We get to meet the Silver Surfer that's in 2 of the 4 Fantastic Four movie we covered for this show. Very different iteration. He get talked to, just like in that book. And that's interesting. I quite enjoyed that book a lot. Galactus, cool villain. Now, this book was quite fun. It was in the 70s, I believe, and for quite some time. If I remember correctly, maybe that's in this book, that Sue Storm is actually the leader of the Fantastic Four for a short period of time. Because Reed did some bad decision, and because of that, Sue took over, because Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm are not really born to be leader, and things go crazy if they would lead. Now in this book, very interesting book, Sue Storm leaves the Fantastic Four to leave Midsa to join her space, her spot. And Sue leaves because of Franklin. Quite a fun story there. I did enjoy that one a lot. Probably one of my favorite Fantastic Four.
And here I am talking about Fantastic Four. I am multi-topic talk, and I hope you will all enjoy the playback most likely. So last week we talked about Fantastic Four First Steps and the terrible Fantastic Four in 2015. This time around we talk about what I consider classics. Granted, I was a child first time I did happen to see both movies we are covering today. But here's the thing. Recently, I did happen to rewatch both movies. And I will say this, and maybe that's a hot take, but one of these two is actually amazing. One of these two is actually slightly better than what we got in First Step. Not that First Step was bad. I think First Step is a standout movie. I've seen a lot of 2025 movies, and I'd say First Step was most likely in my top 40-ish, because I've seen like more than 100 movies, and I have a weird scale. If you have been around on my channel for quite some time, you may know about that. But I do think the original Fantastic Four from 2005 was better than First Steps. And again, I don't want to take away anything from First Steps, because First Steps is indeed a good movie. I just think the original one was slightly better. Now, let's get into Fantastic Four 2005 with Chris Evans as the Torch. Now, I will admit that I think the writing and the Human Torch himself felt a lot more like the Human Torch in the original movie in 2005 than what we got in First Steps. But there's the catch. Chris Evans, acting, directing. I don't know what happened there. The dialogue was clearly at the right place, but I feel like the casting or something really went kind of wrong. Now, I won't hold it against the movie, because I still think Human Torch was cool and it worked very well in that movie. But there's the thing. We have something else to compare to. First Steps. I think the new guy in Johnny Storm in First Steps, the casting was far better than Chris Evans. I just wished we had a mishmash. Let's get the new guy, but let's give him the lines Chris Evans had. That'd be amazing. That'd be amazing. But we didn't get it, and we most likely never will, because that was another era. That was another time. That's 20 years ago. Like, I was young back then. Now I'm having a beard, and I'm thinking about having kids. It's time change. Anyhow, Fantastic Four 2005. I think that movie was very, very enjoyable. Even on my most recent watch, as a child, I was like, oh, superhero, cool, flashy stuff. And back then I didn't read any comic, and as you know it, for film and shows adaptation, I do read a lot of the source of material to educate myself and to provide with a unique perspective as someone that really wants to get to know these people and the books and the comics before watching movies. So, Fantastic Four 2005. I thought that was a great movie. Now, I only had one issue. Let's get into that one issue. That one issue was plot armor on Ben when he got hit by super strength. When he was back to normal, he didn't get massive injuries. That was my only issue. And one can say here, right now, Alicia, she was part of the comics for quite some times. She was white, she was blind, and she was Ben Grimm love interest for quite some time. Most of the comics I've read with Alicia, she was the girlfriend of Ben Grimm. And it's funny because they race swapped her in that 2005 movie. So just imagine that 2005 movie happening today. The backlash, the hatred because of these racist people that hate race swapping. Now, I'm all in for like good representation and create your own character, but you cannot hate an actor or a character because they played something the studio decided to race swap. But that's another can of worm. That's another discussion. To get back on track, Alicia was part of the first Fantastic Four movie in 2005. Now, I will be honest, I've seen both really back to back, and I really wanted to forget about Silver Surfer. So maybe, maybe I might be wrong, but I don't think Alicia came back for the sequel, which is a bit unfortunate because that's some kind of missed opportunity. Because I do remember they don't really have Alicia talking to Silver Surfer, and now I mentioned that because in the comics, the one I've read, Alicia is the one that talked down to Silver Surfer and that convinced Silver Surfer sentient life, sentient being are worth fighting for, and Galactus is kind of wrong to just want to eat people like that. But now that's the next topic. That's Silver Surfer. Now I kind of lost myself in that discussion with Alicia. Anyhow, Alicia in this 2005 movie was great. I get why they picked her. It felt like her. The dialogue, the character, the exchange with Ben Grimm. It felt like a genuine connection. It felt like I was watching a comic in live action with actors and a CGI beast or someone with a big costume with After Effect or something. So, that's one thing. Now, I spoke about casting. I'm not the biggest fan of Pedro Pascal. I am so done seeing him in everything. Nothing against the guy. I think he works very well, and sometimes I'm like, oh, he was the highlight of that movie. It was really cool. And I will be honest, in First Step, I do think he felt like the comics. It was really cool, and he is someone with anxiety in the comics as well. So it kind of worked well in First Steps. But here's the thing, and maybe in Nostalgia we'll talk, but I do think the guy we had in 2005 felt a lot more like Reed Richard. I just I've read the comics again and I've rewatched that movie and I really feel like the casting was on point. A lot more than Pedro Pascal. I don't know if it's because of my hatred for Pedro Pascal because I'm so done seeing the guy in every single thing. But I do think Reed Richard was slightly better in the 2005 version. That leads me to the next one. Alba, Jessica Alba. Again, maybe I have a hot take, but I do think she embodied much better Sue Storm than Vanessa Kirby. And again, I do think Vanessa Kirby was great in the role. She I think everyone in First Step did great job. Just think it was done better in 2005. That's a bit unfortunate. They really nailed that casting in my books. And maybe I'm crazy. Or maybe because I think Jessica Alba is utter, I don't know. Or maybe it's like I really don't know. But again, I think Jessica Alba, and maybe nostalgia talks, but I do think she was a better Sue Storm, and um, her dialogue never felt as weird as what we got with First Steps. Maybe that's another factor that's against Vanessa Kirby, and it's sad because Vanessa Kirby is not the one that wrote the dialogue. It's the writers, it's the people behind the scenes. So blame Disney Studio for maybe me thinking the one we had in 2005 was better. Now, the fourth member of the Fantastic Four, we got the Thing. I will be honest, I think both actors are equal. I'd even say maybe the one from 2005 might be slightly above, just simply because we got to spend more time with him when he's not a Thing. And we got to really bond with that bald guy better than what we got with First Steps. But in the other end, with First Steps, well, with First Steps, I think the looks, they nailed it. It looks like the Thing a lot more than whatever we got in 2005. I guess in 2005 they did good for what they had back then. They don't have the technology they do now. That's a big factor. But again, I think the casting was kind of good in both cases. I think it's the only of the four where I'm like, you know what? Let me think about it, and maybe I will change my mind. But I think everyone else, that 2005 casting just worked better for me. And maybe that's the factor why I like so much that movie, because I felt like the casting was on point. Even Doctor Doom was on point in the 2005. I'm excited to see Ronnie Downey Jr. Taking the role for Doomsday in 2027, I think. Might be wrong, but I'm excited to see what the guy will bring up. Speaking of Doctor Doom, the actor that played Doctor Doom in Fantastic Four 2005 movie, it's so unfortunate. He died like I think a month or two ago, really recently, and it's kind of shocking. It's sad. The guy was like in his 50s. You're like in your 50s. Like why? Ow! It's so sad. Like usually people live up to at least in the 60s. Like I've known people really bad health, and like they never really took care of themselves, and they are in their 70s. So when I hear about someone dying in their 50s like that, it's so sad. This review here is a bit messy. I'm sorry about that. Like I'm all over the place. I go on tangent. I barely talk about the movie. I've only mentioned my one issue with that movie. So let's really focus more on the movie now. So I think Doom stealing the surf. Oh no, that was I'm reading through the notes I had about the second one. Okay, now I have the right notes. Reed being scared of taking what he wants was a nice character trait. It felt like the comics. Johnny seducing everyone was funny, and I feel like that kind of stuff, depending who you are, maybe it doesn't age well, but I mean, he was like that in the comics in the 60s. How many girlfriend he was known to have? Like, too many. So when I see him, like, walking around and talking like that, that's why it goes back to what I said. He talks like Johnny. I think it's really the acting, the directing that was off-putting. And maybe it was even like Chris Evans himself doesn't really look that much like Johnny Storm, while the new guy does look a lot more like Johnny Storm. Um, but yeah. So nice tragedy of Ben being turned into a monster. That was sad, and I feel like that tragedy of being turned into a monster was shown much better in 2005. Don't know what happened with the new one. Maybe they wanted to give a different spin. Maybe it didn't work with the tone of the MCU. That's why they didn't address that. But in this 2005 movie, you can tell he hates being the Thing. And that's something right from the comics. He hates being the Thing. Sometimes it caused divides within the Fantastic Four because he was the Thing and he hated it. Sometimes he had conflicts with Reed Richards because he blamed Reed Richards for that. So again, I think that that subtle thing that may look small, it felt like the comics. I like it. I keep saying that because I've read comics. That's why. And we gotta be honest there. Now, Von Doom turning into a villain was cool and it made sense. Nice contrast between Von Doom and Ben. One embraces the new powers, the other hates it. And it's kind of interesting how the villain is the one that embraces it, while the good guy hates it. And it's so valid because you're ugly and you need to get a blind girlfriend to have a girlfriend. It's so sad. It's so sad. And again, to come back to first steps, we are more accepting of difference, and it didn't feel like the burden it felt in 2005 to be the Thing. And maybe it's because we are more progressive and we are more accepting and people are more different, and that's why. But I feel like that's a core thing about the Thing. The Thing hates being the Thing because he is an outcast and he is treated as such. Food for thoughts. If you make another Fantastic Four movie in the future, think about that. The Thing hates being the Thing, and it makes sense. In this new flick, I don't think he hates it. He actually enjoys it. He embraces the more narcissist part, because there's a bit of narcissist part in the comics as well, where he likes the fame and that's the other side of the coin. Yes, he hates being ugly, but he enjoys being popular. And I think that aspect of enjoying being popular, First Steps did it much better. And it was almost not there at all based on what I remember from both Fantastic Four in the 2000s. I think I understand why they did that. I think it would have clashed the tone, because you have something very serious and the same character also deals with something very funny. Look how beautiful I am, but I hate myself. It's so I think both iteration approach character another way, and it worked both times. But I just think the Thing in 2005, that's more my cup of tea. Reed's desire to embrace his relationship with Sue was nice growth. Now, the action was very fun. The humor, I'm surprised. I feel like it did age well. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm also the guy that enjoyed like the first two Fast and Furious until like anything that came after was awful. And I felt like the humor was good there. So maybe I'm just a guy that grew up in that era and the humor worked for me. I don't know. That's all I felt. Now, I've talked in length about this first Fantastic Four movie, the 2005 one. Before I close that part of the stream, one can say, me, I played the video game. We'll play the video game. I can't remember if I finished the game, but I know I went very far. I miss the old days, the old life where you would get a new superhero flick and boom, you get a video game. Bring that back. I'm old, I know. Now, the first Fantastic Four in my books was amazing. Very underrated. And I don't have a lot more to say. I was hoping to maybe get a dragon here, but the dragon may be occupied. That's why I didn't join the link. With that being said, we will give a 9.7 out of 10 for the first Fantastic Four, the one made in 2005. I like that thing. Now let's move on to the next one. The next one is the one I hated. The next one is the mistake. The next one is like, what happened? What the hell is even that? And it's tragic because I really want to love that movie. And it's hilarious because it's very similar to First Step. But it's a what if First Step messed up. Because it's basically the same story they tried to adapt. But they did it so poorly. I can't even remember if Alicia was around. I don't even remember if Silver Surfer had any line of dialogue. I don't know. That movie is a blur, and it's funny because I seen it right after Fantastic Four, and I remember the first one far better than this thing. Silver Surfer. The new girl is amazing. She was the best part of First Steps. In my books. Matt disagreed, but that's fine. That's why I'm glad to have guests on so we can disagree on stuff. But the girl was amazing. And now, go back in 2007. The guy, the Silver Surfer. Gosh, what happened there? It was bad. I don't even remember if he has any dialogue whatsoever. He is a non-character, easy plot device. He brings Galactus and some lore. How bad can you make it like that? It's beyond me. I don't get it. I don't understand. Now let's get into the issue. First issue, the dialogue was off-putting in the airport. Number 2, okay, the humor didn't age well, especially with the thing burping. Yeah, that was back then when burping was meant to be funny. I don't know, like that's a kid's movie. Maybe if I was a kid, that would work better. But it's so bad. It's funny how I was praising how first one was aging well, but the second one is a train wreck. It's a dumpster fire. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what they were doing. My third issue, the dance scene was painfully bad and it didn't age well. The naked scene attempt at humor didn't age well. The movie tried to do many stories. Doctor Doom didn't belong with Silver Surfer and Galactus. It was just brought back because they had the actor. I felt like cut him off. It's filler. You don't need that. It's not good. So I think really the issue with that movie is the pacing, maybe because Doom was filler. The dialogue, the terrible humor. It's an insult. It's unbearable. Maybe I'm crazy to really pine on that and keep coming back. And maybe there are other issues I just don't see. But that was a chore to get through that movie. I was like, why did I choose to watch that thing? I like pain and suffering, I guess. Now. There's still a few okay things. I've seen you cheesy and corny lines. I think it kind of worked because the comics are cheesy and corny. I mean, they call everything the Fantastic, like the Fantastic Car, the Fantastic Baby, the Fantastic Crib. Comics are corny. Comics are cheesy. So parts of the humor overall did work, even if that was my biggest issue with that movie, the dialogue and the humor. I think parts of it still worked, and I'm like, you know what? I'm behind you with that. That was the issue, but there are moments where you're like, you know what? I give them a pass there. Reed growth into embracing a family despite the superhero thing was cool. Doom stealing the surfboard made sense. Reed growth into placing his marriage before the country was nice. That's the kind of character arc you get to see in the comics. The VFX, surprisingly enough, I think they did work. Um, it's a bit unfair if you compare it to First Steps. First Steps had a much better Galactus, but we are talking about a movie that's made in 2025 against a movie that's made in 2007. And let's be honest, 2007 back then, it had been like roughly 15 years they started using special effect. Prior, that was all technical and stuff. So that was still new technology. And now today, it's not new anymore. It's been 3 decades we have access to really good visual effects. Now the action in Silver Surfer is probably the only enjoyable thing. And I also thought that was interesting how Johnny swapped powers with others. That gave a very different dynamic. I wouldn't be surprised if that was in one of the comics I didn't read, because let's be honest, Fantastic Four are so big, they cover like way too long. Like they have now, as of today, they have like 60 years of history. And even if I've read like 5 Fantastic Four compilation big books, I think I've maybe covered 10 years at most among these 60 years. So I've missed a lot. I've seen bits of the 90s. I've seen bits of the 70s. I've seen most of the 60s. The 60s is what I've read the most about the Fantastic Four. And that's my experience. Now, don't have a lot more to say, to be honest. I think Fantastic Four, the Silver Surfer, is a bad movie. Well, actually, it's mediocre at best. It's not quite bad, but it's not good either. It's mediocre. It's like, you know what? You have a passing grade if you're in the school system, but you're not impressive, because I'm used to give like really high grades in a lot of things. So if you end up with what you are getting now, Fantastic Four Silver Surfer, a 6 out of 10, that means you did something wrong. I don't think that movie worked. And again, it was a chore to get through it. It's not the worst thing I've seen. I've seen a lot more bad movies. Snow White 2025. That was an insult to movie making. But that's it. Casting. And just before we get into the source of material segment, being the last segment of that stream, one gotta say, Galactus was a non-character in Silver Surfer. That's tragic, because he was so cool in First Steps. Tragic. Now, the source of material segment. So, the source of material segment. Here we are. I think both movies approach different comics in different aspects of each characters. Both movies did very good. We talked about how much I thought First Steps did amazing. I think that the first Fantastic Four in 2005 did also amazing. I think Johnny Storm had the right lines and dialogue. Maybe not the right delivery. Maybe not the right direction. Maybe there was something missing. But the dialogue itself felt like a Fantastic Four a movie. Dr. Doom felt like Dr. Doom. He was obsessed over the Fantastic Four, and lots of his hatred was just toward them. And it was like, you know what? I hate all of you guys. And in the comics I've read, he hates them because They are the obstacle of his world domination scheme. So it's very similar to what we got with the comics. Let's clap for that. Let's praise that. Alicia, even if they race swapped her, I do think she was well casted. She really felt like the Alicia I've read in the comics. She was compassionate, she was entertaining, and her scenes with Ben Grimm were really good and enjoyable. And the humor was solid, at least in the first one. And just them going in space and getting their power, that's the basic origin story. And First Steps and the 2005, they did that very, very well. One must praise when you deserve to praise. With that being said, I do think Fantastic Four 2005 is a great adaptation. I can't remember what I've given to First Steps, and I will be honest, that movie is 2 weeks ago for me, and I've seen so much other movies. So what I said last week remains, and what I will say now about the first Fantastic Four in 2005, I think the first Fantastic Four in 2005 deserves a solid 9 out of 10 as an adaptation of the Fantastic Four. I think what's lacking is really Johnny Storm, I think. As much as the dialogue was there, I feel like it didn't get the look. If they casted someone else, maybe I would be like, you know what, that's the perfect Johnny Storm. But I really feel like the Fantastic Four are so important when you cast them. Of course, the writing of their character is also very important. I think it's nailed there. They feel like their comic counterpart, but I just don't like Chris Evans in the role. And again, doesn't mean he did bad. It doesn't mean it's a bad movie because of that. I just think they could have done better. I look back at First Steps and I'm like, that's Johnny Storm. I wish he had the dialogue of Chris Evans, because if you have the actor in First Steps with the dialogue that really feel arrogance and charming and seducing girls, that's Johnny Storm for me. And they really toned him down in First Steps, because First Steps is made in 2025 while the other movie was made in 2005. So I think as an adaptation, Fantastic Four 2005 deserves a 9 out of 10. Now, Silver Surfer. Why did you mix Doctor Doom? Why Galactus is a non-character? Why would Silver Surfer just flip and help the good guys? In First Steps, it was made much better. Johnny was the bridge. Johnny served the Alicia role in First Step. And with this Silver Surfer movie, I don't remember any bridge. So it's terrible. I think as an adaptation, it's not that great. Yes, there's the corny. Yes, there's the aesthetic. But, Galactus was a cloud. They mean that around. So, I think as an adaptation, Silver Surfer is lacking. This is the worst thing I've seen. No, I don't think so. As an adaptation, I think it's between a 4 and a 5. I don't know where I sit exactly with that. Maybe a 5 more than a 4, because I think the casting outside of Chris Evans is kind of good. And Silver Surfer does Silver Surfer stuff. And they are not really strong enough to beat Galactus. And parts of the story felt like a comic as well. So again, a 5. I think a 5 is fair enough when you say, oh, yeah, that's a 5 as an adaptation. Now, I was hoping to get someone else on the show. Nobody came in. Maybe everyone is occupied. With that being said, in Fantastic Vengeance, next week, we talk about the Punisher. 3 Punisher movie. And I enjoyed all of these 3. Unlike Ghost Riders, we will talk about Ghost Riders in the future as well. because this is Fantastic Vengeance. With that being said, the Red Blue Podcast will be back soon. 1 month, if the guys are ready. And y'all, thank you for watching, and see you next week for The Punisher. And I hope all of you will enjoy. I will be reading more books and comics, and see you next time. Bye-bye.